Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Occult Explorers. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Dion. How's it going, Dion?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Amazing. So we're here, and we're back for part 2 of our Epicurean guide to Lucifer, where we're looking into sort of the high culture, aristocracy, art, food, haute couture, all about of Europe, and looking into the literature and all of these different kind of sources and how they relate to the rise in Satanism and Luciferianism. And there's this really kind of interesting period in Europe between the 12th century and then through the Renaissance up until about the 18th century, where you have this flourishing of a lot of this dark kind of Luciferian, satanic occult philosophy. And that's kind of what we're looking at in broad strokes, right? And before we get in too deep, though, I want to always give our warnings. So first warning, Dion and I are just a couple friends. We're really interested in this stuff. We love to do explorations. We love to do our research, but all the opinions expressed here are our own. Use your own reasoning, make up your own mind, and we're trying to just present ideas. We're not making any firm judgments on anything presented here. So again, use your reason and figure out what the truth truly is for yourself. And also, trigger warning, this episode is going to get dark. There's going to be sex, violence, drugs, the usual business here, right, Dion?
You never know. Just every time we got to give that trigger warning, as well as politics, intrigue. It's everything's a trigger, I guess, nowadays.
That's a good point, right? But still, we want to make sure that everyone is aware that we're going to be getting into the darker aspects of this stuff. So, Dion, why don't you remind everyone what we talked about in our first episode and where we're going? And also, our good friend, Dr. Aman, is going to be our special guest, and he's going to come in at the end after Dion's presentation. So look forward to seeing Aman give his opinions and thoughts on what we've talked about tonight. So that'll be fun. But yes, Dion, please give us a recap and set the stage.
Oh, well, definitely. Go back and watch it if you got time, anybody. Part of it was we used the backdrop of the movie The Ninth Gate, part of the source material for The Ninth Gate, Club Dumas, Alexander Dumas, The Three Musketeers, Dante Alighieri, Milton's Paradise Lost, a lot of different works, as well as Christine de Pizan. And the idea of secret codes being in antique books. And also the aspect of, you said, haute couture, fine dining, fine arts, and how the dark side started to take on a seductive element in literature and art.
Right. And also we talked a lot about like that high society, right? We talked briefly about the Marquis de Sade, and, a lot of this kind of stuff is coming out of this European aristocracy,
Yep, that's right. That's right. It's a culture of Lucifer, antique books, secret codes, and the culinary arts. And with that, I'd like to say, let's think of the dinner table as a sacrificial altar. That's what it is. That's where it comes out of. So if you see in those ancient movies or in paintings, when somebody's strapped down to the altar, they're basically a ritual meal for a god to be consumed. And so regardless if it's animal sacrifice, human sacrifice, a candle, a food offering, any type of offering, it's a meal to be consumed by a type of a god in a lot of the ancient magics and cultures. So we'll be looking into that as well. So, and with that said, we'll go to the first picture if we could.
Of course. Here we go.
And so this is Bartolomeo Sacchi, who was a chef in around 1475, wrote a book of honorable pleasure and health. And he's an interesting character. And this will relate to, let's say, Ninth Gate source material as well.
Interesting.
He was thrown. All right, let's tell you a little bit about him before. He joined the military from a noble family. And he also studied with the person named John Agriopoulos, which I guess means silver. He's a philosopher. He was a Greek philosopher at the time.
He's an interesting character because he's famous. I believe it's like 14th century. He's part of the Renaissance, and he was revitalizing Greek philosophy and writing within Italy. He's famous for like translating a bunch of the works of Aristotle.
Yeah, exactly. And supposedly he was a teacher of Leonardo da Vinci as well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so he studied from him. This, like I said, joined the military, then studied with the philosopher and studied root cutting and how to cook and medicines. Because John had set up a type of a Greek teaching monastery, let's say.
Beautiful.
And with John's name meaning silver. The agrio pulos supposedly means silver or the moon, and as well as Platini's name is from platinum. So it's funny that the teacher is silver and the student is platinum.
Oh, but, that's interesting.
So some things happened where this character right here, and he's famous for writing the world's first printed cookbook. Let's say, because there's always been cookbooks around since anybody can scribble or cuneiforms or anything on ancient manuscripts, because it's all formulated. That's the whole point. All these ritual prayers to gods are like cooking recipes, let's say. And so he comes up with the world's first cookbook, printed cookbook in Italy at this time. And he's thrown into what's called the Castle Sant'Angelo.
Oh,
the castle of the Holy Angel.
So he's imprisoned for what?
Yeah, for heresies, because he wrote a letter to the Pope, telling the Pope. And see, at this point, he's a famous chef.
Right.
People like his food because, like I said, he studied with John. He studied root cutting, and so he revolutionized food at that time. And the Pope was getting rid of some offices at this time. This is Pope II, Paul II, and so he wrote letters saying, hey, you shouldn't do that. These are translators, people that would translate Greek documents. It was a lot of these translators of ancient texts and manuscripts. And the Pope was like, nah, we don't need these people no more. He was going to get rid of some of those offices. And so when he wrote these letters, the Pope threw them in the castle for heresy. He's like, well, then I'm going to just kill you then, stupid dumbass. Excuse my language. But and some more things happened at that castle. Let's go to the next picture.
That's so wild. Can't say anything to the freaking Pope.
Well, yeah, because this is that castle he put him in, which also was part of the papal apartments as well, some of it, and it connects to Vatican City. There's a lot of history that deals with this weird castle, even with the past episode that we did.
Do you know how intense of an imprisonment this would be? Because I know that a lot of people of an upper class at this time, when they are thrown in prison, it is a like sedentary locking up, but often they have their own, slaves or maids, and they're living in still a life of luxury. What do you know what his life was like in this castle?
No, it wasn't luxury, because it's funny because some of the jail cells were below the papal apartments. Because he wanted to go downstairs and torture him himself, the Pope, sometimes.
Oh my gosh!
Oh yeah. And so go to the next page.
Oh, poor dude! Wow.
And this shows how Vatican City is connected to the castle on the right, which is a star fort. That red line connects it. There's a secret little passage that's built just for the Pope to go to the star, and it's a star fort. Once again, I wanted to show you. And it was a mausoleum too. It has Hadrian is buried there in a mausoleum. So it's a prison, it's a temple, it's a mausoleum, it's the papal apartments sometimes. And you know who else is buried there? Giordano Bruno, remember we talked about him in the last episode?
Oh, wow, Bruno.
No, not
another
buried there, that's where he was imprisoned before they barbecued him on the stake. That's where they held him. Cagliostro was there.
Wow.
Hit the next pic. So here's one of the popes. This is Sixtus. You can see his hands are raised to it. That's the castle on the right. Because he had visions that the Archangel Michael, he saw visions of the Archangel Michael on the top of the castle. And so he was praying to, to the thing. And so there's, over time, they've had different incarnations of different statues of the Archangel Michael there. As well, supposedly there's tunnels underneath the thing. But go to the next pic. So here's one of the popes. This is Pope Stefan. Pope Stefan the Sixth. He exhumed the corpse of Pope Formosa, and so on the right, that's a skeleton of a pope.
I was just thinking that looks really foreboding, but no, that's a full-on corpse.
He dug up his body, put him in the chair just to accuse him.
Wild.
Just to accuse him, he dug up his dead body, the other pope. And then but eventually that didn't work because he ended up in the castle as prisoner too. Go to the next page.
What did he accuse him of?
Oh, I don't remember. They put him on trial. He even had a mock trial. Tosca. That's you know what Tosca is?
No, what's Tosca? It sounds familiar.
It's an opera in 3 acts. Where it means of Tuscan. What Toscan? What is the name of the? It's on the very top right there, on top of Tosca. If you could read it, is it Puccini?
Yeah, Puccini, Giacomo Puccini.
Yeah, Giacomo Puccini. Giacomo Puccini, and it means of Tuscany, and that's the character there, the lady. And what happens is, her lover's being imprisoned, and so she does a deal with the dude who's imprisoning him, the evil character, and says, "Well, write this letter so I can get him out." And it turns out that and then she kills him after that, because she thinks, all right, I can now get my lover out. I got the letter, but the letter is not to free him. And it turns out that he was already killed anyways. And so what she does is, that's just paraphrasing the story, mind you. She jumps off of in the opera, the Castle St. Angelo. And that's where they are, on top of the castle right there. And you see that's the Archangel Michael behind him.
Wild.
And it's a famous castle in literature and books and in the myth. Just wanted to let you know, sidetracking a little bit. Let's go to the next pic. All right, so back to his name is Bartolomeo Planti. So he's in prison in that castle there. And one day there's a cardinal comes to town. And supposedly the cook had taken off with like a maid service or something, and there's no one to cook the meal. So he told him, "Hey, I know how to cook. I'm a famous chef. I can cook for you." And so the prison warden says, "Well, let's give it a try. I have this cardinal coming through, and please do something." So he cooks the meal. It's so good, the cardinal likes it, and he tells him, "Hey, who cooked this meal? Bring the chef." And he goes, "Well, I'm sorry, but the chef's a prisoner." And the cardinal goes, "What? What happened? Why is he here?" And he goes, "Yeah, because he pissed off the other pope. He pissed off the pope." And he says, "Well, let me talk to him." And so he has a meeting with him. He said, "Hey, you cook good food." And he tells him, "Well, what'd you do to piss off the Pope?" And he said, "Well, he wanted to get rid of an office in the Vatican of all these translators, someone was speaking up to 7 languages, who translated ancient Greek. He didn't want the ancient Greek translators around no more for some reason." And he said, "I don't think that's a good idea." And this cardinal says, "I agree with you. So let's see what happens." He puts in a good word, and Il Planti ends up getting pardoned and leaves and becomes a chef. Well,
beautiful.
Within a year, that cardinal becomes the new pope. Calls him to the Vatican and says, "Hey, I want to reward you, and this is how I'm going to reward you. I want to make you the head librarian of the Vatican and of all the secret archives."
Whoa!
Based on your cooking, yeah, huh?
Based on your cooking. I think they were talking more about cooking when they were talking about those Greek translators that needed to stay in office. What was Planti getting at in those Vatican archives? That's what I want.
No, there's a lot more. And even in this painting. So let's decode the painting a little bit. So he's the one on the ground there. And even the colors. We don't need to get into blue and red colors. We've already done that in multiple episodes. But look at his finger. It's pointing.
Oh.
It pointed at something in the text. And so go to the next picture. And so that's it right there. What's the word? It means Pontus Portus Lasbot. That's a harbor, a bridge. It means a bridge, harbor, and concealed.
Oh, Dark Harbor, anyone?
That's what he's pointing at. I'll do it up for you.
Ooh, interesting. We got some Grail myth going on.
Yeah. So go to the next pic. All right, so something happens. He publishes a cookbook called Of Honorable Health and Pleasure with the Pope. The Pope tells him, hey, there's this another previous chef I like. I want you to bring in his recipes and let's make a cookbook, and we're going to publish it through the Vatican, and I'll help put it out and sponsor it. And it becomes a famous cookbook. And later on, he even gets banned for it. Even though he's in good graces of the Pope then, in multiple editions later on, he's banned because of what's called humanist philosophy. Managed to find its way into this cookbook, the world's first printed cookbook, along with healing remedies. That would sound like, what a doctor would put. So it got him in trouble later on. And as well as
what they considered humanism in this book? Like, what was the humanistic philosophy that was so offensive to the Catholics?
We'll have to go deeper on it in later episodes, but part of it is free will. And cooking, teaching you how to cook, it's teaching a form of free will in these recipes because there's an approach to it. And there's a lot into it. And there's also the sybilline seals that we're going to talk about. But before I even go into that, here's another cookbook that's done a century later by another Bartolomeo Sacchi, not Sacchi, but Sacchi. And he's famous for having the world's first printed cookbook that's illustrated with these pictures. Here's one of the pictures right there. And he changed a lot of systems with cooking. Even like way before Sacchi, he was inventing stations, and he made it all males and even little outfits they should wear. And you see on the top left there, what he has is, you see the hanging man like in Tarot?
Yeah.
Is that not what the hanging man is? When it's hanging upside down, it's a sacrificial piece of meat ready to be consumed.
Oh, that is such an interesting, I had never thought of that.
Yeah. And
wow.
And so Sacchi's book, and this right here, the picture, it's called the scullery, because that's a term in kitchen etiquette. There's a part of it's a kitchen in a kitchen, let's say. And it comes from the term wooden platter, because we're going to get into some platters and bowl things as well, because we talked about platters in previous episodes. These plates and platters that they put the heads on when you cut off heads in ancient myths. A lot of times it goes on a special bowl or plate. Right. So there's more to it. There's even a book that I found that people can look up by an author named L. Liebert, and it's called From Book to Cook, Visual Pedagogy in Bartolomeo Sacchi's Opera. And when I say opera, I don't mean a singing opera. That meant a collection of works. And that's where he put his different recipes in his opera. And this book called Visual Pedagogy is implying that there's different elements in the pictures of the book, the illustrations, like puzzles we were talking about in previous episodes in these works. And I think there is. And it ends up on the Vatican's watch list later on because of that, let's say. And so the word pedagogy, go to the next picture. That's funny because I was like, pedagogy. In my mind, I'm like, what does that mean? And the first definition it says is to teach, a child teacher, to teach a subject to students. It just means to teach. That's how people think of pedagogy is, a form of teaching. But if you look it up, what a pedagogue was, it was a slave who led a male child to school in the morning and then back home in the afternoon. So it's a male child are males. It's a slave that goes out and gets other male children to take them to be initiated.
Oh, interesting. That's so wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this all makes a lot of sense, though. This idea of hiding these keys inside of literature, right? And hiding this stuff inside of images. This is something that was already done within the pagan practices, right? As we've seen with the Orphic Vox, or we can see with sacred images in general, with all of the eidolons. You know, image is the earliest form of language. So that's really important. And this idea of the free will that you were getting at, I want to emphasize, like, this is sort of the defining sort of philosophical tenet of all of these satanic Luciferian authors. And what is really behind this sort of satanic image is this power of the concept of free will and this pursuit of absolute freedom, or this expression of freedom. And you can see that in every aspect of all of these characters. This is why, like, and we'll get into this with later episodes, where you see people like Rabelais talking about Thelema, the will, this power of the will, and being able to exercise your own free will, you know? And that takes on a whole new meaning with people like Crowley and other kind of magical figures, you know? So this is a very deep idea, this free will. So them accusing this Sconti guy of encoding images about free, was it Sconti, sorry, or Scapi?
Well, as Scotchy and then Scapi, they're both named Bartolomeo, okay. But that's what the first one is. Il Planti is what people.
Planti and Scapi, okay.
Yeah.
But it's Scapi who's doing this book. But if Scapi's encoding this book with images to promote the freedom and free will, that's as, you know, satanic as it gets.
And so part of it is that both the books, even though they're published a century apart, let's say, there's a famous group of publishers. It's these brothers, the Trevon, their names. Well, before we get into the brothers that do the publishing, I want to tell you more about the brothers Seal, because the publishing house that published these books, both of these cookbooks, put like a little Sybil, a watermark on the books. That's one of the reasons they got in trouble as well, from the Tramezzino publishing house, the brothers. You know, like the Ninth Gate.
Okay, they had a sigil of the Sybil on their books.
Yeah,
okay, clarify this for people.
And so, but first we got to understand what Sybil and how and why. And the story actually begins in what's it, like 1440. There's a guy named Antoine de Nassau who publishes a book called The Salad. And it's a collection of cosmography, stories, eyewitness accounts. And part of it is the Sybil of Cumae, which is next to Naples. Let's hit the next pic. And so you see right there, that's the actual, the watermark right there in one of the books. And that's at the top, you say Il Platina. Yeah. That's the chef's name. And right there is a picture, and it even says Sybil in the picture. And we'll explore the sigil a little more later, the little watermark, because there's goats hidden in it and other little, let's say, symbolism. So, you know, I want to explore where the Sybil of Cumae mythology comes from. Right. So go to the next pic. Right. So it's a lake, and this is a Lago d'Averno, Lake of Venice. And this is a Cumae, which is the oldest Greek settlement out of Greece. Beautiful. And this is part of Virgil's the Aeneid, the Aeneid. How do you say it? The Aeneid. The Aeneid. Aeneid. The Aeneid with Aeneas is the main character. Well, it's supposed to take place at this lake with the Sybil that leads them into an underworld. Just like in Dante in the past episode, you got like a Sibylline character, a Lucifer character that leads you through the underworld. And what the name of this lake means is Lake of No Birds. Because no birds would fly over the lake because they would die, because it was a volcanic crater lake and had gases in ancient times. And so the ancients would observe that the birds would die if they fly over the lake.
And we got to remember, right? Augury of birds is a very, very important form of, divination that was utilized by the Greeks. So they definitely are taking notice, and this is important,
Oh, yeah. And here it's considered the entrance of the underworld, where Anus goes into, led by the Sybil, and the Sybil supposedly goes into a trance from Apollo, comes down and possesses her. So let's hit the next pic. And this is the cave. This is the actual cave itself, the entrance to the underworld there, where the Sybil would have taken him down there after he was possessed. And in part of the myths, it's wild. Because in one version, the Sybil, all right, there's the last king of Rome was called Tarquinius, King Tarquinius. And what happens is the Sybil does 9 books of prophecy and takes them to try to sell them to King Tarquinius. And he says, I don't want them. So she burns 3 and then comes back with 6 books and says, do you want to buy them now? And he says no. So she burns another 3, comes back with 3, and he buys them. And this become part of the famous 3 books of prophecy that they would consult. From this Sybil right here at this cave, supposedly. And there's also a place called Mount Sybilla, Monte Sybilla, which is a mountain that's far away from there on the other side of town, that also people propose where the Sybil comes from as well. But today we're talking about the Sybil of Cumae. And like I said, there's talk of goat hoofs in a lot of the myths, in the Etruscan myths of the area, the ancient, the pre-Roman myths. They talk about the Sybil's wearing loose-fitting clothing to hide their goat hoofs. And in some of the caves floor, they would see the goat hoofs, but on their hind legs, obviously, because it wasn't sets of 4, it was sets of 2.
That's so interesting. So they were satyrs, potentially.
And there's different Christian authors that say that this prophecy talks about Jesus Christ. And so there's different evangelicals and different, like I said, authors that have books they write about the Sibylline prophecy being related to the second coming of Jesus, let's say.
Oh, interesting. What are they saying? Do you know offhand?
No, I don't get into it. And here's the thing. We're going to get into something a little different. So on one of these famous, there's a coin of the Sybil of Cumae. And on her head, she has this is a famous coin, she has a plate, which is called a Petera. Go to the next page. Oh, right there. Well, just before we go to that, this is Apollo possessing the Sybil of Cumae.
That's beautiful.
So
notice the halo on Apollo's head, right?
Yeah, and grabbing her hand right there.
Yeah.
It's part of it because it's said to possess her. And in the background, you see like sheep or goats.
Yeah.
Symbolism. That's part of it. And so go to the next pic. And so there it is right there. So this is the Etruscan priest they found, a statue. And he's holding the Petera in his hand. And a Petera is this bowl that has a knob in the middle and underneath for you to hold, to grasp, to hold it with. And these are the bowls they do libations for. So you would put some kind of sacrifice like wine or blood into the bowl, and they'd mix wine with honeys and water and herbs, and then you would pour that to a god. And then you could take it yourself, or sometimes put it into a fire. Because everything is a food for a god. That's what I would like to drive home part of this episode, is that all ritual magic is cooking magic. It's midwifery at that. So let's hit the next picture. So here's Apollo again. Apollo and Artemis. And he's using that same type of bowl to do a libation to the Amphipolis stone.
Right. That's so wild. Yeah, you have the Omphalos. He's pouring the libation. You have the bull's head at the top there, right? You have, it looks like it's Artemis off to the left here. Beautiful. Wow.
You know, in the so in previous episodes we talked about that bowl is what they put the head of John the Baptist on. They also take the head of Orpheus.
Yeah, and they put it on the Patera. That's true.
Or they put it on a lyre. There's different characters that are offered up on a bowl, their head. The symbolism of the bowl. In the bowl is called a charger in certain versions. And a charger is like a heating plate. It holds electrical energy at that. And it's like a shield. It ages. You know, it's with the goat skin with the head of Medusa on it.
Right.
Which is, in those shields are a form of a missile in ancient times, where they put something on it like hot dung and fling the missile with the catapult.
This is a really important image, because this is a central image we see in the Indian traditions, where that round thing that you throw, that weapon, is the spinning chakra, which becomes a profound image throughout all of the alchemy and the yogic tradition, where it becomes these centers of energy in the body, and many various traditions, depending on which Indian philosophy you're looking at. But yeah, this kind of idea of this chakra, this spinning disc weapon, you know, that on which the head rests, this is something you see. And we even see these Indian images where the head is flying on the chakra. So,
well, if you want to unpack it Indian style, that's a Shiva Linga.
That is. Omphalos is 100% a Shiva Lingam, you know?
And at the top, that's called it's that symbol. It's a bow, a bovine symbol.
Yes, the Taurus.
Called a brocranium is the term with that skull at the top, because we're going to talk about that too as well.
Right.
The symbol of the skull at the top there. So when I was talking about the shield with Medusa's head on it and the charger bowl, so go to the next picture. This is a fillet, or a type of these bowls, Petera, these discs, with bee symbolism on it. And you could put something in there. A libation to offer up something. Go to the next picture.
And the bee symbolism is hugely important, people. I mean, if you didn't catch out my episode I did with Buffy, where we interviewed Dr. Carla Ionescu, who's doing a whole deep dive into Artemis at Ephesus, she is 100% certain in her mind that on the eidolon of Artemis, that those white nodules are bee eggs, queen bee eggs, and that Artemis is the queen bee, just as her priests we know are called worker bees. So like, this is really profound magical symbolism, right? And then also think about the bees and the bowls. We talked about that on previous episode, where the bees are making their hives inside of either a bull or a lion. And that relates to both Cybele and to Hercules and a bunch of really interesting stuff. So yeah, sorry. I wanted to skip that.
Good. You know, and speaking of the omphalos stone in the previous picture, on the one at Delphi, it has bee symbols on it. Like
it does, yeah. It has bees drawn, like carved into it in a ring, carrying like string around the omphalos.
And so I want to bring up that at that time, then at this point, is the Oracle of Delphi, the Oracle of Aman, the Persian Oracle, because there's different oracles, and this is the Sybilline Oracle at Cumae. That's what we're exploring today, as well as the relationship with the charger or the plate, the fillet, the Petera. That's the head of John the Baptist right there with Salome. And in part of the myth, he flies around, bothering them, talking. And so you'll see cherubs with blowing wind in a lot of different woodcuts and paintings and stuff in the corners, you'll see. The talking head, it's called. There's a band named after it. So let's hit the next pic. There it is right there. There's the head of John the Baptist flying, but he has the plate attached, not just the halo.
So wild. And I love the imagery of this painting is incredible. Like, I love how, gosh, yeah, the outfits are just amazing. Anyway, beautiful image. That's profound.
And in ancient times, the shield was a goat skin with Medusa's head on it. Go to the next pic. There it is right there. But it wasn't necessarily a shield. You could wear it. And it wasn't necessarily Medusa's head. It could be a snake's head. So a snake's head on a goat skin that you wore for protection eventually becomes a shield that can fly through the air, or something that you put a sacrifice onto. And so, speaking of these heads, in the snake or the goat's head or on the goat shield, go to the next pic. So this term, I talked about a bull cranium up in that picture I showed you that had the ox skull. Here's a goat skull. And what they would do is actually take a goat skull and plaster it onto a building, so that, you know, underneath would be a real goat skull.
Wow.
And
that's freaky.
part of what I was talking about was that's the symbol of the Sybil of Cumae is goats. In that particular version, she, like I said, had goat hoofs. They talk about it with the clothing and on the ground, the hoofs, the hoof prints. And it's, like I said, in the watermark of the Tramezzino Brothers, which is Michele, especially the brother Michele was famous for. Go to the next pic. So that's the watermark right there. I don't know.
So this is what they're printing on the first cookbook and the first illustrated cookbook. So the one by
and a lot of other famous maps at that time too. And I don't know if you could see where she's pointing right there, or she has the books in her hand right there. There's these heads, and the heads, and they have goat horns like Dionysus, the Bacchic stuff.
Interesting.
And that's already the first watermark we'll see with the goats, with the goat horns right there, and the Sybil, and the books, the prophecy. So this is in their books, and their books could be about anything, about Christian subjects, maps, philosophy, what have you. And this is hidden somewhere in there because that's his watermark. Go to the next pic. So this is, once again, this is a Tramezzino, Michele Tramezzino. And if you notice, there's the angles of inclusion as well, like those procession equinox. You'll see in like how people have old staffs and different things, because you'll see that the body is facing one way, but the head is facing another way. And then at the top right corner, even the angel up there is looking the same way that Sybil's eyes are looking. And what are her eyes looking at? Down towards
they're looking at the goat head.
Watch, go to the next pic. There it is, the goat head.
Wow.
And that's what she's looking at. And the angel is looking at, even though her body's facing somewhere else with the books. So this is in the cookbook. These and the dude, like I said, got thrown in the castle for heresies, was put in charge of the Vatican Library and secret archives. And so cooking and the occult arts go together. Just later on, it becomes mundane. It's just the kitchen. We don't really see the esoteric nature of what cooking's all about. So let's hit the next pic.
That's such a really good point, though, because like we have lost this sort of esoteric connection to cooking, and you know, a lot of these, like the early sacrifice rituals, would be a barbecue. There'd be a ritual communal eating of food, a coming together of community and family, and a magical celebration, right? They weren't just these murderous rituals that we've now turned them into because of this Christian, obsession with otherizing faiths that are different from it. And like, I want to emphasize too, like when we're looking at like the Orphic kind of magic and whatnot, within the Orphic tradition, this idea of the dismemberment, the tearing apart, and the consumption, right? We have Saturn consuming his children. We have Phanes ripping himself apart in order to know himself, right? In order to make love, to produce more children. And it's this cycle of death and rebirth and this reincarnation. So there is this cyclical self-consumption that is at the heart of this philosophical image we're talking about with the Orphic tradition, where we are all that one world soul, that Fani's consuming itself, right?
This is true. This is true. So earlier we talked about 9 books and the sybilline 9 books and how 369, the number, came into play. Now we're going to move on to Dorthy L. Sayers. This is 1933, and she's an author. And at the time, she was one of the world's leading Dante translators. That's her game.
And we know Dante, the Inferno, that's as magical as it gets, right?
Yeah. So go to the next pick. And this is her work she wrote called The Nine Tailors, 1933. It's a detective book. It's the 9th in the series, these Lord Peter Wimsey novels. And this one is based on this, they steal some jewels, some emeralds in a small little town there. But it revolves around bell ringing rituals. Campanonology, it's called. Yeah. And so let's get a little more into it. That's the art of bell ringing. And what it means is the speech of bells. And in the movie, there's a movie and a book. The hero, like I said, Lord Peter Wimsey, he's an expert on food and culinary stuff. He's from the military. And wine, expert on wine and antique books. And the way the story starts off, on New Year's Eve, he wrecks his car by the church in the snow. You can see it snowing. And there's a cemetery there. And they're going to do a bell ringing ritual. It's called a pill. And they need an extra person because in ancient times, when they ring the bells, those are ropes.
Of course.
And so different bells at different pitch. So you need different people to ring it. And you got to be timed up different, right? That's called campanonology, the art of bell ringing, the speech of the bells. Go to the next pic. Yeah, see the bells right there. And then you got ropes, and you pull down on them. And so in the book, they're going to do a ceremony, which is called a pill, which starts at 12 midnight, a 9-hour ceremony of ringing bells.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
Yeah, because there's a thing to ringing bells. And the book gets into that because the book called The Nine Tailors, what that means is the 9 tellers, because it's telling you something. The bell tells you. And when the bell is rung 9 times, that tells you that someone's died in a local village. And if it's rung 6 times, that means a woman's died. So it's a man has died if it's rung 9 times, a woman 6 times, and a child 3 times. Because I was talking about the 369 as well. And so that's what it means. 9 tailors make a man in Christ. Because when you hear that 9 times, you know, well, someone's died. You've heard the term "for whom the bell tolls."
Yeah, of course.
You know, so that's where it's coming from. It's a signal. And eventually in the book, you find out that the villain has been hung by one of these ropes, the bell tower, and goes crazy from the sound of the bells. Because we talked about the hanging in a lot of these different literature and movies, the tarot symbology of the hanging. And I was positing that it comes back to hanging food upside down to drain the blood before it's cooked in those earlier woodcuts in the cookbooks. But and there's even more of the little mystery in this book. I mean, she's really smart what she writes about, because each bell has a name, and some of them have biblical names. And on the main bell, which is named Peter, it has a cipher on the bell itself. And that's that's the name of the episode, which says, 9 tailors make a man in Christ, is death at end, and Adam yet begin. But not only is it have symbolic or allegorical meanings or code, go to the next page. It's part of bell ringing. See, this campanonology, there's how they ring the bells. They have their own notation. And there's ciphers as well. So there's bell ciphers. And so in the book, the hero solves the murder by using the cipher of the bells, as well as the code of number 9. And so there's more to this number 9 that we'll get into. You've heard of the term 12 noon?
Yeah.
Yeah, why is it saying noon when noon means 9?
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that.
Yeah, and there's a reason to. Part of it is monks wake up at 6 a.m. to 3 p.m., and that's when they start the next round of prayers. That's 9 hours. And at 3 p.m. is a special time of day. That's the 9th hour. Counting from when they wake up. The 9th hour is when Christ dies at 3 p.m. when the eclipse takes place. In some of the episodes we talked about that. That's called the 9th hour. The eclipse happens. Go to the next page. Here's a version right there of it. You can see where the sun is eclipsed. Then you have the Marys there as well. Because you got to have Lucifer to take you to the underworld, whether it's Beatrice, the Sybil, Lucifer, whoever. She's in the story. And it's funny because he's crucified one way, but you see the other two people are crucified the normal way where they're tied.
Right.
And they show you that. But want to show you that eclipse is considered noon, 9, the 9th hour. And there's more to the symbology because at that time is when supposedly there's the Aramaic phrases, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, sabazios, El. And there's supposed to be some pirates let go that were going to be crucified. Different things happening in this story. But as well, when he's resurrected, he makes 9 appearances. And there's 9 people that are raised from the grave. So there's more to the 9 even in the Bible. You know, and it's funny because I remember in one episode, or the last episode, we talked about Paradise Lost, Milton. And the quote that we have from Paradise Lost, which was 9 times the space that measures night and day. Now it makes more sense. The quote from Milton there that I was talking about. As well,
Yeah. Wow.
you know, in the Bible, there's something where there's the upper room. I don't know if you remembered in any of Aman's videos, he talked about an upper room they go to.
Yeah. Well, this is an occulted thing, and this is something that's been also heavily debated, right? Because the upper room, the high place, this is a name of the main god too of the Philistines, which would have been Baal Zebulon, Lord of the high place, which becomes corrupted to Beelzebub, Lord of the flies. At least that's one scholarly thing that's been put forward. Point being is that this Lord of these upper places, the mountains, this high height, climbing up, and this esoteric symbology is deep in that area of the Middle East.
Well, part of it, they go to the upper room for 9 days to do the ritual before some of these Pentecost or Ascension rituals that deal with transfiguration. And that ritual later becomes the novena. You heard of the novena?
No.
The novena is a Catholic ritual. That's a 9-day ceremony. That's very famous for people that want to have a miracle take place. If your family member's sick, then you'll do a 9-day novena where you pray for 9 days.
Yeah. I know what it is now.
Yeah, it's very popular. Go to the next picture. Here's some beads for that. And these are called chaplet beads. And those are lava rock, which could have been meteorites in ancient days. And what a chaplet is, it has 9 beads, a crucifix, and that metal with the saint's head on it. Remember I talked about the saint's head on the plate or on the shield with the crucifix and then the 9 beads. And this is a form called a chaplet, a niner at that. And you go through the rosaries, the Hail Marys, the Hail Fathers, and there's just some esoteric stuff with the Catholic stuff going on with the number 9 and 9th hour and 9th gates, and you know the shield of Medusa and all that.
Like we talked about before, all that Pythagorean numeral symbolism, where 9 is the final number, right, of the standard number sequence. Then you go to a new set right? Where 0 is not a number, 0 is a placeholder, right? So the highest number in the traditional Greek Pythagorean number system is 9, right? It's that absolute expulsion of power. You see this still in the tarot, where the 9 is always the most intense number, and the 6 is the most balanced and kind of powerful.
Yeah, so that could be the 9 muses as well, right there, the Enan.
Right.
So, hopefully we'll get our friend Dr. Aman on. And at this time, I want to have everyone like, subscribe, share. In our next episode next week, we're going to talk about the 9 worthies, the 9 unknown. We'll get more into the Golden Dawn, OTO, maybe some Cat of Nine Tails, Argento, because we still got so much coming.
Oh, there's so much to get into this. Like, we need to get into the poison stuff. What? Remember that whole fiasco of the poisons?
The affair of the poisons, the La Voisin. And it deals with the mistresses of Louis XIV. And they were going to get abortions and illegal abortions, all the mistresses of the aristocracy in Paris. But they were having satanic rituals. We're talking about naked bodies on the altar with candles, people chanting, and all the aristocracy was into it, getting high in opium, laudanum, cannabis, what have you. So
right.
It's a wild world out there. And this translates later on into the Golden Dawn and Crowley. And
oh yeah, we're gonna get deep into that because there's so many connections. Like for Crowley, we need to get into Francois Rabelais, Gargantua, and we need to get into so much. But Aman, thank you for joining us. How's it going?
It's going good, Snappy. How is this universe carrying on with the two of you? I love this.
Having fun.
What do you think of the presentation?
I thought the what I saw was fantastic. When you get into those codes, you get kind of where guys like me look around and we're like, hey, I'm over my head. So yeah, whenever you get into, you read that 15th, 16th century coded work stuff, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, there's a lot more art to this and a lot more things I got to memorize. So that I find that kind of tough. The vein of Orphism that you hit is straight. I mean, that's a geyser, you know what I mean? That one's going to give us a lot of cubic meters of gas,
Well,
how much?
If I can say one thing, the codes end up revealing Greek mysteries.
Yeah, right. All that Renaissance goodery. I swear that's where it comes from. I was dumping on the Middle Ages the other day again, saying, what a dump, what a terrible place. We got jack out of this. We pulled down our own stuff. We couldn't even smelt the metals the same way anymore. What's wrong with what's wrong with humanity? But you guys were showing how that stuff is preserved in those difficult times. I love it. I thought, I think you're both hitting on something that, people who have great reputations, great thinkers coming before you, that was their area of interest as well. I mean, it's, somebody needs to write a history. Who's going to write the history of the progression of the rites through time? The history of the mystery, we'll call it.
Right. Oh, that's going to be such an undertaking. I think it's going to take many writers. But one thing I wanted to ask you from Dion's research is, are you familiar with this Renaissance scholar, John Agrippolos?
No, I hadn't worked with him at all. So it's all new to me. I'm your student in that case.
Because he seems to be, from our research, a key figure initiating the Renaissance and was obsessed with Greek philosophy. Now, he does come out of the sort of Aristotelian, Platonic sort of mode, which is probably why you have yet to read him or dig into him. But I think there is some serious stuff there maybe with him because he has such a wide influence. Like, you found he was also, what other figures was he connected to, Dion, that you mentioned?
Supposedly, the Medici studied under him, and Leonardo da Vinci also went to study with them. And what he was trying to do was introduce ancient Greek principles into what was the Papal States, because they were having papal wars and they were trying to tighten up Catholicism. And at that time, there was a group of philosophers that were trying to say, we need to bring back the Greek.
And that's what gets the Planty chef, that's what gets Planty thrown in prison, is because he says, you can't get rid of the Greek translations. We need to maintain these offices. So then the Pope throws him in the dungeon for this.
Notice that those attempts to preserve classical civilization are usually associated with a movement either away from or towards total tyranny. And it's almost like we as humans reach back to this period that we know there was something there that, you know, was pre-Christian. It was the origin of what, you know, all those idiots sat around and said, oh, democracy, right? Let's get it. Like, you know, exactly. No, exactly. And the people through time, you just hit a vein of another one. Of course, what do all these people have in common who try to bring back that classical piece? That they all have the Greek philology in common. You know, even from those Byzantine Christians who came up with all of the sources that we don't have from antiquity, but started quoting them because they were trying to do the same thing, trying to revive Greek, trying to take it to a higher plane where it once was. You said Aristotle and Plato. Yeah, I'm going to stay away. I had enough of Aristotle and Plato, right? Totally. I'd much rather go to, Boccaccio. You know what I mean? He's in that, he's slid into the myth and he's just gliding right there, just kind of being Ovidian. You know what I mean? That's another.
We mentioned that previous episode because this is another one of these kind of free will Renaissance satanic strains, because Boccaccio is good friends with Petrarch, and Petrarch is considered widely as one of the initiators of the Renaissance. And why? Because he translates the works of Cicero and he brings back Ciceronian style Latin, which you've ranted about many times. But I want to remind people, Cicero is this figure of reason above all else, which is why one of the things, like, you know, you can criticize him for some things, but that is such a profound thing, especially from that time, you know, to put reason. Like, he talks about how he's in the cult of Pythagoras, but he doesn't submit to Pythagoras, and he calls a lot of his fellow Pythagoreans kind of losers for doing so.
You know, it's funny. Boccaccio has a work that has 9 illustrations in it that supposedly form a puzzle that Christine de Pizan was influenced by. Yeah. That I came across that, and I'm like, whoa, there's actually authors who talk about this stuff. This is just, it goes back so many centuries, it gets forgotten.
Yeah.
And you know, one thing I want to ask you about, Aman, is the Sybil of Cumae. Because Cumae, I was reading about, was one of the oldest outposts of Greece of ancient times. And that the Cumaean Sybilline there, and a temple to Apollo there, a volcanic lake, is supposedly a pretty popular spot in ancient times.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be there, and that lake is absolutely one of the most breathtaking natural phenomenon, you know, that you can possibly see. But yeah, that oracle is hugely important. It was her, wasn't it her leaves that Mary Shelley was the one who collected?
Yeah, we were talking about that. Go ahead, sorry.
No, do you see the extent of the Bacchic Empire, right? All of those oracles that are kind of outposts, they are the sources of civilization. They're the machines that are solving what colonies are going to put where, and who's going to go to war with whom, and you know, they're guiding and directing everything, almost as if they have this power to direct history itself. And as a result of that, you produce oracles with their poetry. And we all know.
This is something I really wanted to ask you about, this directing of history, because, okay, a while ago, you brought up the secret name of Rome. And this has been kind of like an ongoing pet project of my research. It's not going well, but it's going. Anyway, while I am looking into this, one of the things that I came across was conflicting origins of Rome and the construction of the Roman myth. And a lot of this has to do with the Greeks had their own version, which was that Rome was founded by the children of Circe and Odysseus. And the Romans hated this because apparently it meant that they were the children of a witch. So part of the Aeneid is correcting this and creating a new, more epic story where they're Trojans. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this and the origins of Rome, and also because the Cumaean Sibyl features so predominantly in the Aeneid and the story of Aeneas, and it transforms that whole mythic history of Rome, right? It rewrites our entire vision, you know?
Yeah, that's Boccaccio's mystery right there. Did you find her name before I say anything? Did you find the secret name of Rome?
No, I don't think I did. I sent you a couple things and you never replied, so I'm saying no.
That's the thing about the secret name. When you learn of the secret name of the god, it's not like it's knowledge. It's when you employ that name, and you will understand the name by its employment. Isn't that cool? That's how the yeah, back to the origins of Rome. You know where I think, Snappy, the one place that you got to look, and I think you would like these gals. I think you would like them a lot. The Lupi. We talk about origins of the Roman people, and what are these wolves? Yeah, exactly. Who are they? Who is the great Lacaina, right? In Greek, the Lacaina. She's kind of like the Dracaina, the dragon queen that we see with Clytemnestra, right? She's officially in that cult post. But the Lucaina, the wolf queen, is the one who comes all the way from the east, right? Morning Star, you're thinking Morning Star, all the way from the east in order to suckle, right? To feed Romulus and Remus. What's going on there? Well, we know that the priestess was raped. She was raped by Mars, and that process brought about the founders of our society. So if you appreciate those wolves and you ask yourself, what are wolves? Imagine a group of priestesses who was raised within a system that uses drugs to reinforce indoctrination, hunting skills, everything that is a part of their strange life. I was reading just 2 days ago. I was reading this great account, and I thought, oh, you'd love this. You'd love this. There's an engagement going on. There's an encroachment of a group of people who are mixed Scythian and Greek, and there's an encroachment into a territory of another tribe of Scythians, and they come out to meet him and they say, hey, you're not welcome. You know, we purify our children in these rivers. You want to know how cold that is? And we make them strong. We live from horseback. We have all of our possessions with us, right? He's telling him, go away. And he sees that their leader is a woman. And he mocks them and he says, oh, you're going to make us fight women, right? So he picks up a spear and he throws it, and he throws another one. And the female soldiers that he's hitting are just putting off his thrust, right? The spear's nothing. Well, while he's doing this, the leader had gotten out of the chariot and come around, and he got a battle axe that says, split his head right in half. Now, this account of this engagement is coming from a source who has access to all of the oracular works. So they know, and what they're doing is they're trying to pull that oracular history out and put it right back there. But this was some misogynist who got his head cut in half by a woman, right? I loved it. It was absolutely gorgeous. Where is that world? That world is what the mystery generates, right? You saw the hermaphrodites, Snappy? Did you see the
Yes.
hermaphrodites thing? Tell me what you think about ancient hermaphrodites now.
Oh, I love it. It's essential, like you had pointed out in your episode, which was one of your best in a long time. Amazing, amazing, amazing stuff. But you pointed out the alchemist, like this is a thing that blows my mind, is that it's all sitting there in front of all of our faces. You read any alchemical text, you read any magical grimoire, you even look at any of these ancient Greek, Roman sources. These intersexed beings are everywhere. And often, right, like some of them are male or female presenting, but they're still intersexed. Like Dionysus is often referred to as intersexed, or Aphrodite is referred to as intersexed. There's that famous statue where she lifts her skirt and reveals her phallus. You know, Dionysus is depicted with breasts or wearing a girdle, which is a huge magical symbol in its own right. You know, and in the alchemical texts in the later medieval magical tradition, you have to embody and become the divine hermaphrodite. This is the same thing we see in the Orphic tradition with Tiresias and all of these people trying to embody Fanes and go through that, or what we see with the Galli and people in the Sibylline cults, where they are going through these rites of rejecting the material world and trying to return to that intersexed creatrix, become the goddess herself, right?
I saw a Christian the other day with a very popular show whose big thing now is look at what they were doing in, he says Bible times or something. You know how it is, Snappy. You gotta. He says, you know, look at how it was back in Bible times. These cults, right? These cults were using hermaphroditic things, and we're changing the genders. We're saying that a male could be a female, and look what it did to the civilization. He says they're doing that now. They're doing that now, right? He's also going to talk about them feasting on baby's blood, right? That's coming back. That's a big thing now, right?
But this stuff, it's to take us back more into this satanic realm in Europe, right? This hermaphroditic image is also central to the revival of Satanism. Alpheus Levi emblazons his book on occultism with the image of the Baphomet, and his drawing has become the definitive version of that. And it's clearly an intersex being with Hermes' staff as its phallus. It's, you know, like wild stuff. But like, Emmett, what do you make of, because what we're trying to talk about in this Epicurean guide to Lucifer, and Dion, I want your opinion too, because what is going on? Because between the 14th and the 18th century, we see this secret codes start to appear about free will during the Renaissance. We see this revival of this Luciferianism. We see it be attacked and people get killed for it. But then by the 18th century, you have people who are openly Satanists, like Lord Byron, or at least invoking that image of Lucifer, like Lord Byron, or J.K. Huysman with Labat. You have, and then Crowley, who calls himself the Beast 666, which eventually leads to modern new movements like Satanism that we have in America with LaVey. What do you make of all this? What's going on at that point in history?
It's a reassertion of a natural reality that recurs through history, and people recognize it and run with it in whatever way their culture at the time is penetrating their brain and influencing them. And you see it over and over again. It is that Antichrist. It's really the spirit. People ask me, they're like, how do you know that Christianity comes from classical Greek cult mystery? Because all of the terminology they use is the same, right? Where do you think they got the word Christ, right? It's a pharmacological term. So the Antichrist right, is the antidote. It's the thing that you give when people understand that the system they're living in is the monster. Then it opens up a gateway so that you can suck in that Dracula, you can suck in that darkness, and you can say, okay, now we have the justification to destroy you, right? To see what you've done. That's why Vlad was able to do what he did in the Order of the Dragon, because that justification was there, that concrete, chemical, biological justification. And it's only when knowledge of the mystery emerges. Think about it. If people today knew that you could put yourself, you could go through a series of events where somebody was able to give you a drug, put you into a mental state that would purge a lot of stuff that's your current problems, make things work out in your brain, and put you into a death state and pull you back out of it so that you could see and observe what was happening beyond death, right? The whole death process. If you could die once and come back, you could tell people, well, it's not that bad. Yeah, it hurts a little bit, right, when you're going in, but then all of a sudden, right? If you could do that with someone, you can open them up to a natural scientific reality that we're disallowed from having when we live under the gloom and boot heel of monotheism and faiths and dogmas, right? I don't care if they're, how it is, Snappy. You can talk about, Hinduism being dogmatic, right? I mean, it's just that freedom that is part of classical civilization, that people reach back for, and in reaching back for it, they grab Lucifer every time, right? Because why? He's that one who stands there saying, no, this is full of shit, right? Yahoo, I'm sorry to curse, Yahoo is full of it, right? And you're not going to die. Let me show you, right? If you do this, your eyes will be opened, right? That is what is being done to you and me on a regular basis, and Dion too, right? That oppression, that ignorance, that willful ignorance, right? And who's saying this? Look, Cicero came out and he said, look, you got to do the mystery, man. You haven't lived, bro, if you haven't done the mystery, right? Okay. If our modern society understood this, that Christians, your religion is based upon the performance of this mystery. I mean, your whole resurrected Christ and everything like that, it's based in this performance, where under the right circumstances, you can be pushed to the edge so that you can see what is there and be pulled back, and it will change. It will profoundly change your brain. The chemicals that they're giving you will profoundly change the way your brain works. So do you want new life or don't you? It turns out the people who go through this process have an appreciation and a fearlessness now for death. Why? Because they've been to the other side. They see what's coming, right? And it's not what you think. And when you get rid of what you're purging those Christian viruses, those Taliban viruses, right? Those Orthodox viruses, right? That are out there. Yeah.
No, you're so right. You're hinting on something that's so quintessential, and it's the predominance of fear and being in this perception of fear, where the fear of death, the fear of whatever, fear of God has become so consuming that people are controllable. They're able to be herded and used like sheep. And this, though, it prevents you from loving your neighbor, from being in a free democratic society, from being a fully acting person. You can't be out in the world and be yourself if you're bound by the fear of death, and they stole this from us in order to keep us under their boot heels, right? And this is something that's so intrinsic. Like, I was talking to our good friend, Dr. Matt, right? The neurologist. And he was saying that you can look at people who are more conservative and they will actually have physical differences in their brain, because where the fear response is double that of someone who has more liberal tendencies, because they're just in this constant state of fear. They're afraid that their neighbors are going to come out and shoot them, right? They don't look at their neighbors as their neighbor, right?
I'd like to respond to that.
Yes.
And it's also responding to Aman too, because he was talking about Vlad Shepes. Vlad Shepes used fear when he put the people on the stakes, but that's also food. When they were staked up like that, that was a form of food. And they eventually became food for the birds at that. And that's what drove the enemy when they saw that. There was a fear, and also seeing them turned into an offering, into a form of food. Because it's one thing to kill somebody and they're on the ground, but by staking them up like that, it turned them into a spit, it's called. Zolon, Staros. They're putting them on a stake. When we talk about the sundial, the maypole, the Shiva Linga, whatever you want to call it, it's the Omphalos stone. But what goes on to that spit is a marinade. And what is the marinade? It's on the fillet or the Petera, the plate. And that's what I brought up with these plates, is that sacred plates are for libations, for the gods. And no matter what the god is, it's a crazy god, a lupine god, a god of thunder, a male, female god, whatever, it's hungry. You got to feed it. It wants something. And that's how you get it. That's why people give sacrifices. That's what these sacrifices are, is to get the god to do something. You have, you have to give your only son, your first begotten son, and you have to burn him on a fire or sacrifice him. It's a form of food. Gods are hungry. And so this deals with food. And so these ritual plates, like Aman, what you think about these libation plates, where they have to put wine on it, and then they have to mix some wine and they drink it and they pour it on something or offer it up. It's like a shield. It's that with the head of Medusa on it, the head of John the Baptist on the plate, the libation plate.
We also see the Galloi with those things too, right? And they use them for the same thing. They put food and they eat off them. And it has something to do with these passcodes, because they make fun of the plates in a lot of the Christian apostatic literature. They say that their rituals are stupid and you got to destroy and break their plates. Why do they single out the Patera that needs to be broken?
Yeah. That's a great question. That's a great question. Dion, I was just reading today, as a matter of fact, in Lucian, where he talks about the deep sauce, the snake that bites you, that causes you to thirst so much in North Africa. And so I was trying to track down more of these references, because I found them in Byzantine doctors are talking about it too. Like, what do you do when people start using it? You know what I mean? And he says that the people who are, get this is love. I knew you, when I read this, I thought, oh, Dion would love this. When you push the poison, you know what I mean? We've all been there, you know what I mean? Pushing the poison. And when you push the poison, you have to have some sort of antidote, or you're going to scream. You're going to scream like the person who's staked, that stauron, right? That crucifixion, right? You're going to scream like that, baby, if you're under the influence of the deep sauce, right? So it's no wonder that Nonus was saying, yeah, the deep sauce was Jesus. They were giving him an antidote for that, right? Almost ironic, isn't it? Almost like it's a planned, manufactured event, crucifixion. But look, it is still a banquet, because that blood of the Savior is still there. And when Vlad is having his banquets, remember, it's supposedly, and who knows, maybe the Germans blew things out of proportion, who were writing about it at the time. And it's right when Gutenberg is getting going, right? You know what I mean? So he's one of, he's popularized as doing this. And maybe it was a little bit of exaggeration, but all of that is reflected in his poets, his buddy poets' work, which is pure, like you were talking, Snappy, is pure Ciceronian Latin. I mean, it's Latin back at its peak. There's something with the languages going on that when cultures create a flourishing renaissance of knowledge, it causes their language to peak. And it's almost like the language is the instrument. And if you can sharpen, right, there's no renaissance ever going to come out of Anglo-Saxon crappery. It's not going to happen. Look what was done with it in the Renaissance, and then look at what different people did at different times, including like Julian, to try to use the Greek to bring that back, to bring back that real cleansing mystery. The fact is, we just all woke up. Guess what? We're living in a place where you get pollution, and you have to purge this over time, right? And Thomas Jefferson's like, every 150 years is going to happen. Your Christians are going to try to take you over, right? 150 years, right? Seriously? Yeah, right. We happen to be right in the middle of it right now. So, yeah. By the way, Snappy, I wanted to ask you, you're right in the middle of this storm. The guy who's at the head of the House in the U.S., that guy is keeping back. He's Moses, right? I don't know if you saw it today, but he's come out. He believes he's Moses and that God has ordained, right? I know it's laughable, but it's crazy. Has ordained that he should lead his people out of Egypt, right? It's one of our former Congress people who's saying this. It's not very reputable. And that he is holding up aid to Ukraine, and that he is sacrificing basically the people to Vlad and his death machine, right? But the reason, knock on the door, and what's behind the door? Well, the Russians hate homosexuality, at least the ones that we want to side with, who are authoritarians. What is the connection with the homosexuality, the big hate? Why is everybody all of a sudden hating homosexuality, trans, anything? You can say the letters out, I don't care. But what is it that's being hated? That I go on and some idiot writes into me and says, you're a degenerate homosexual, right? What is it in the society that brings, I mean, that's summoning the devil, bro. When you've got groups of people who are united in some kind of bitter hatred for something that is natural, right? It's almost like, look, we're asking for the Dark Ages again, people. I think we're there. Snappy.
What do you think is the biggest threat to the patriarchy? Okay. The biggest threat to the patriarchy are men rejecting the patriarchy, okay, and embracing femininity and the feminine women, and celebrating women, and women empowering themselves and taking more power. All of this is the attack on the LGBTQ is about maintaining the patriarchy and about demonizing femininity. And it's about extolling patriarchy, but through a hierarchical lens of control, where all of these men are behind everyone who's at the top, which is either your Putin or your Trump or what have you. And they all have their possessions, which are women and children are nothing but our possessions. And, you're talking about stuff that's happening in your country. In my country, we have the same exact parallel. Our conservative government is preventing aid to Ukraine, and they're yelling about fossil fuels. We can't do it because there's regulation about fossil fuels and trying to protect the environment. And we think that this is environmental ideology. And at the same time, our conservative leader Mr. Pierre Poilievre came out and said that hormone blockers shouldn't be given to people under the age of 18. The drug that's used to regulate puberty, right? Puberty, which ends at 18, you want to not give to people under the age of 18. You're not a medical doctor. Get the fuck out of, stay out. This is my biggest thing. The government needs to stay out of healthcare and allow the medical community to deal with this stuff. This is a question between children, their parents, and the medical doctors, and none of us should have any say in anyone's gender, what have you. That's individual business. You know what I mean? And we're vilifying this because it's people challenging the patriarchy. And someone like Putin, like Trump, they're only the big man and the king because of the patriarchy. If we destroy that, we dismantle that way of thinking, you can't have big men like that, you know?
You know, I would like to address Mike Johnson for you. He's scary in a couple aspects. One, because he's number 3. If something were to happen to Biden looks like he can pass out at any moment, just to be honest. I know he's representing liberal democracy, but I'm sure they're pumping up on a whole bunch of steroids and different things to keep him awake. And if anything were to happen to number 2, Mike Johnson is the leader. I know I'm older than him. The thing that's scary about Mike Johnson is his private life supersedes. He doesn't believe in separation of church and state. That's the thing. And he uses Christian AI. That's what I said, Christian AI. Christian technologies. Like him and his son, they have an app where they can track each other if they masturbate, if they feel like they're going to masturbate, or if they watch porn. They have tracking systems on their phone, and he's connected to his son and the dad. And if any of them looks at it, and it's not just if his son looks at it, which would be a natural thing for a teen to explore anything, good or bad. But it's also if Mike looks at it, the son gets a text like, hey, your dad's looking at something. Like, why do we have to worry if dad's looking at something? I worry if teens looking at something because it's natural for them to explore everything, good or bad. Like I'm saying, they want to explore. That's part of growing up. But dad's still growing up, and he uses Christian technologies that have AI, and which is already the mark of the beast anyways. If that's what they're into, they shouldn't be messing around with computers and AI and evangelical stuff. He's a heavy evangelical. Doesn't believe in separation of church or state.
But this is what a lot of the war is about, Jan, right? Like Putin as an Orthodox Christian and as this dictator figure is representative of this old way of doing things. And we're seeing the conservatives in North America, they like him because he is like them. You know, he's vilifying the same things. He's right now going on a pogrom, removing and imprisoning all of the LGBT people in his country. And they want to do that in their country. You know, they want to bring that shit here. And they're barely even hiding it. Like in the US, you guys need to look into that Project 2025, which is done by a bunch of right-wing groups where they're talking about, we want to get rid of public education. We want to get rid of public health care. We want to end access to pornography. We want to make the state explicitly Christian. Right?
You know where the most pornography comes from? The IP addresses are Utah.
I'm not surprised. Come on. I'm not surprised for even 1 second. Because they're not having healthy sex, right? When you refuse people to be able to do what's natural, then they get all weird and pervy. You want to end like abusive pornography, allow people to have normal consensual sex and encourage them and teach them about it. Like, Jesus, this is it's so ridiculous. We're in this mindset that if we teach people about sex and about the existence of gay people, people will become gay. No, they'll just be educated, you bloody pieces of shit. You know what we are. We're attracted to what we are. You can't make nobody like nothing. We just like what we like. And we need to accept each other. There's responsibilities and boundaries, but there's also acceptance. That's what this is all about. People wonder, what's this Epicurean stuff with Lucifer? And well, we're talking about how in ancient times, there was mystery rites that we go through to learn gender, to learn birth and death, to learn all these ancient mysteries.
In modern times, or what happened to the Catholic Church and different organizations, it was suppressed and sanitized and demonized and turned into what we call Lucifer and Satan. At a certain point in the 1400s to the 1800s, they started to bring that dark side back through literature and fine arts. And it started to be seductive, this dark side. What Lucifer is, it's Bacchus, it's Dionysus, it's Apollo, it's Mithra. It's a symbol for that. That's what that is. And so Blake, Shelton, all these artists, they started to encode this into their works. That's what this is about. That's where Satanism comes from. It comes from a response to oppression. But there is a dark side of Satanism as well. Just some real satanic people or evil people who get off on hurting others. And hurting others don't need a formula. It don't need a ritual. It's just a negative energy, a hurt energy, that suffering energy that people have and pass on to others. And they ritualize it. So when we look at Luciferian energy, there is a dark side, a suffering side, but there's also a light side, an enlightenment side. And that's what this is part of, separating that. And that's what the discernment is in culinary arts, learning how to cook, learning how to get rid of what's bad. So that's the Epicurean guide. You know, that's what we're looking at here.
It's very civilized of you both. You know what I mean? Bringing back, you're doing what they're trying to do in the Renaissance, right? You're doing what Julian was trying to do. You're trying to give people back that which has been taken away. Why is it that, I'm sorry, I just laughed my tail off. Why is it that sex always beats the Christian, right? Doesn't matter who it is, doesn't matter where they are, sex always beats them. It's like there's some kind of inherent power in the mother of the Roman people, right? There's some kind of inherent, she'll always win. Every one of you preachers, everyone can be taken down in an instant. Why? Because you are supposed to be enjoying intercourse. You are supposed to be learning from intercourse. You're supposed to have your relationship with that other man, pastor so-and-so. You're supposed to. It's a part of nature, right? We see it happen. We don't have any problem with it in classical civilization. There's nobody standing over us. There's no Yahoo, right? Zeus himself, you know, he's got a boyfriend. Sorry, but that's the way it is. Because you know how nature is, baby. You know how nature is. When you've seen 4 different kinds of hermaphrodites, I was reading this Greek text and I was like, okay, I understand where I am. I'm at what people would call the taint and the perineum. And I understand. I'm looking at all these genitalia moving around, and that doctor flashed up that diagram of a clitoris transforming into a penis. And I was like, yes, that, look, it's nature. It's gorgeous. When the Christians tell you and the Taliban tells you, you know, you're going to have to cover yourself all over the place because we don't want to see anything that's going to get a rise out of anybody. You know what I mean? You can either suppress that until it destroys you, right? Like how, if they're tracking people who are jerking off to internet. Personally, I think the stupidest question on the planet is the one that my phone gives me. Do you want to see more of these? Of course I do. What? Why did I do this search? Right? What are you talking about? Yeah. I think it's quite a testimony that Christianity is consistently and forever defeated by Venus. That means a lot. Yeah.
You know, I'd like to bring up one good point. You talked about Ganymede. That relationship is culinary. It starts with the cup. It's a culinary relationship. There's a process of herbal imbibement to have a transformation. Like even restaurants, they come from the word restorative. Back in the day when you go to a bed, a place to sleep, an inn, they would give you some soup called a restorative. That eventually became a restaurant. And everything is food based here. It's an offering, it's a meal, a culinary exchange. But speaking of Lucifer as well, in the Latin Mass they do at Easter every year, You guys should type it in when it happens. And what they do is they sing a song to Lucifer. They talk about Christ rising through the flames, and they say Lucifer for Lucifer, the morning star, every Easter. And I watch it every Easter. I type it in, and it's in the Vatican, and they're all there, and they have this guy singing Lucifer, but he calls it Lucifer. Says it a few times and talks about how they're risen through the flames, the morning star. It's present in the songs and the rituals. It ain't going nowhere. The fallen angel. But he's a fallen angel or just a teacher in a different form.
It's encoded everywhere. I always think too, like the myth of the serpent in the fruit. What is the fruit is food. That's a transformative in eating and consumption, and this is something that we see in a lot of the myths, right?
So all this shit that we're all fucked up and going to hell is because it started with the bad food choice on the menu,
right?
Because somebody chose the wrong. Oh, come on.
Someone ate the wrong food, right? They eat the forbidden fruit, which was probably a psychedelic mushroom, almost certainly if you go back to the pre-Christian images, right? So the woman chose the mushroom over the man. That's what happened. And the dude got pissed about it.
Some Neanderthal was like, hey, don't eat that, Bill. You're not supposed to eat that. It's not food. Oh, and religion was born. Right.
Well, I got some Ghirardelli dark chocolate right here. I'm going to bust out for the occasion.
Nice.
Intense dark chocolate and enjoy. Cocoa. It's good for you. It was used by the Aztecs and Mayans ceremonially, for rituals.
I know they did a tobacco enema. Have you ever heard of a chocolate enema?
Yeah. I've done the tobacco drinking. I got the whole group sick. But everyone agreed to it ahead of time because they wanted to do a ritual with drinking of tobacco. And it was tobacco, maybe some ayahuasca, different stuff. And everybody were warned, like, you'll get sick. Most of us were sick for 2 or 3 days. And mind you, I don't smoke cigarettes. I've never smoked cigarettes. But we wanted to do a tobacco medicine ritual, like the shamans did it, where they drank tobacco. And I'll never do it again, but I'm glad I at least did it once.
What's that thing with that they did to the penis? There was something the head guy, or maybe he was a head priest, would like pierce his penis and some kind of, first they'd get him with a whole bunch of enema, and then he would do something to piercing his penis. Did you guys ever see that?
I didn't see that one.
No, I haven't seen that one. I've seen similar kind of crazy sex rites like that, but not in Latin America.
I thought the gentleman who was on the History Channel show that did drugs in antiquity, they did the Stone Ages. He was talking about some of the crazy stuff they did. And I'm just wondering, are some of these acts that we can, because you're both touching upon them. Is there a way to know that, hey, this stuff is actually happening and has been happening? And there's a reason that you, I don't know, pierce your genitalia. There's a reason that you drink something and cause yourself to enter into a psychotic fit, right? If you haven't been there, it's why you're having so many mental health problems. You need to enter into that panic, and somebody needs to beat you and kill you and then raise you from the dead. Once you've been there, you're in a good place. I'm wondering, are some of these things that, like with the mutilation, with the self-mutilation, or with the sadomasochism, is there something there? Are these Bacchanals always pictured as striping people for a reason? Is there a reason they're running around with their leather straps hitting girls on the chest? Who's doing that? Oh, the boys who want to date them. Right? What?
Well, yeah,
right?
there's reasons. Besides dopamine and serotonin receptors being closely related to pleasure and pain, it also speeds up your adrenaline system and helps push the drugs faster through your system. And once again, talking about all these cuts on the skin, if you had ointments or oils on the whip itself, it would go into through the skin, and through the adrenaline, it speeds up, and dopamine and serotonin as well help synergize things in the body as
Well,
it's
like
going on.
in India today, we still see a lot of these rites like we would have seen at Sparta, where people are whipping themselves. If you go to Sri Lanka today or to Tamil Nadu, you'll see people doing these whipping rites to the god Kartikeya, which is probably Ares, similar to Ares. It's kind of like a war god. And Kartikeya is related to the Pleiades, I believe, but people will even do things like pull chariots. They'll put chariots into their skin of their backs with hooks, and then they'll pull them as feats of strength.
You know about
And a
the
lot of
fakir?
this-
You know the fakir?
yeah.
Yeah. You know, yeah, exactly.
There's all this kind of crazy stuff that has to do with the destroying of the flesh, the whipping of the flesh, and we see this a lot with yogis too, because when you look at the philosophy of it, when you enter into these states of extreme dopamine and serotonin release, you can also force your body to enter into drug states, and where you're producing natural DMT, you know. And a lot of these yogis, like you'll see these when I was in Varanasi, you would often see yogis who would do these extreme forms of self-mutilation, like the most common ones where they don't put one arm down until it atrophies, you know, and it completely turns necrotic and rots away. Or they do the same thing with the legs, and the legs like swell up like balloons until they necrosize and rot away.
But what you get out of that is something called a siddhi, which is power
Yeah,
for the mind,
magical powers.
power over something, because you have to sacrifice. You have to give up one thing, like your arm or use of a body part, to acquire a discipline over the mind, some type of power, they would say, you know. But speaking of the flagellanti and the flagellation, I like to throw in one thing. Those beads, the last picture that I showed, part of it, there's a ritual, the novena to Padre Pio. And Padre Pio is a Catholic saint that we're going to be talking about in the next video or the one after that, because he suffered the stigmata, supposedly. And people will say that he was putting chemicals himself. In his order, they do that. They practice where they do the whipping of them. And there's a new movie coming out that Shia LaBeouf is playing, Padre Pio. And it's produced by Abel Ferrara, who did 120 Days of Sodom. And or not 120 Days of Sodom, but the movie about Pasolini. You know Pasolini.
Yeah. Who directed the original 120 Days?
And that's where William Dafoe plays Pasolini in the movie. And Pasolini did 120 Days of Sodom, if you know about that. But there's a lot of occult stuff dealing with the secret societies, flagellation, stigmatas, Catholic stuff, and the ninth stuff dealing with these ninth gate symbols. That's been, I'm just throwing it out there because that's going to be coming up in the next couple of episodes.
It's wild you bring up the stigmata, because this is a known phenomenon in a couple different cultures. You have similar things in Indian cultures, again, where people, through this kind of yogic practice of obsession, can cause wounds to appear, can cause their bodies to break down. And this is something that these gurus will, or these sadhus will engage in. It's to show that they're in total control of the self, and to talk about, basically to prove that life is this illusion, this game which they're trying to break free of. So they engage in this self-destructive kind of behavior because none of this matters, and the body is impermanent, and I'm already free, you know?
Of all the magic powers that you know, I don't think I'd want that one. You know, that one's on the shelf that I didn't look at.
You don't want to get the wounds of Christ. You don't want to magically, spontaneously destroy your body.
Who wants to make stigmata, man? I don't want to make stigmata. Now that dream raping stuff. Now that's got to be I mean, if I were to walk into that store of magic powers, I'd want it. That's the one I'd want. I want to have that one. You know what I mean? I don't understand why the self-inflicted wounding is so central to Christianity. It's almost like they don't want your eyes to be opened, Eve. They don't want your eyes to be open. So what are they going to do? They're going to sit around and beat their genitals, right? They're going to sit around and just give it to themselves. You know what I mean? Why do that? Why embrace that? Why embrace that crucifix? Why embrace that? There's had to be something in the dope that they were using, that the Christs were using. There's got to be something in that dope, in the pain. Would you want to burn, Snappy? Would you want to burn alive? Like feel the sensation like you're burning alive, so that everybody else who's getting crucified is like, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ.
I think what it is it's almost a corruption and a transformation of the pagan rites. Like if we look at Sybil, where you have these priests who are going through this process of castration to effeminize themselves and to become that mother goddess and to ascend the holy mountain and to reject the material world. Well, what I see in that is two images of femininity. The mother goddess, which is this pure mother creative energy that you're aspiring to become. And you're rejecting this, the male gaze, in a sense, the obsession with sexuality and the degradation of women and the utilization of women for pleasure. So what you're seeing in the rites of Sybil is kind of like a break with the material and going into this high philosophical feminine mode. But in Christianity, you have a rejection of the feminine, but then on one end, right, the material debauched nature or what have you, but you never have that return of the feminine on the other end. You know, you're then turning to the Father God and submitting. You know, it's a complete rejection of all femininity. And the castration is about this rejection. It's about, I am bound by my love for women. My love for women and my sexuality, or my sex in general, even if it's attraction to men, is keeping me imprisoned. It's keeping me committing sin. So I must mutilate myself in order to break free of sin. It's like a total twisting and misunderstanding of what was going on with the Sybil rites, where they're embodying a different aspect of the feminine. There is no rejection of the feminine. But in Christianity, there's a clear almost rejection, especially by the time you get to Protestant and evangelical versions, you know?
You know, you were saying one thing about the flagellante, why people do that. I'd like to answer that through the lens of cooking, through the culinary arts real quick. When you have a piece of meat, sometimes you tenderize it before you eat it. Are you familiar with this? That chefs do that. They strike it over and over and tenderize it. Considering that we're vessels and we're a self-sacrifice to the God, that's what the flagellante is. You're sacrificing yourself or whipping yourself to the God, to whatever higher power it is. And if you're a food, you're tenderizing yourself for the God. If we could see that as a self-tenderizing.
And maybe take your self-tenderizing and based it prostatically with a little bit of the purple. Remember Mary's fingers are purple? You know where she sticks those fingers? Yeah. It's a means of applying a drug in antiquity. Isn't that interesting? Is that all that we need? We just need that chemical jump to get us so that we don't have these emotional and mental problems. I love that. I love that. The fact that the hermaphrodite is coming back. I wanted to ask, Snappy, I've wanted to ask you for a long time. I've wanted to ask you, what is the gaze? Is it in transitioning, the person who is transitioning? Is it diversion or attraction of the gaze that sets off those people who are, you know, supporting Putin, right? Is it because they all of a sudden now see you as a transitioning sexuality and that fear of being attracted? I was with my family once, pulled up to a place and were served by a beautiful person. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Clearly somebody transitioning, but you could see in her, you could see the slow return to that femininity that she was before her testosterone kicked in and, you know, made her not that source, that feminine source. Are you going back? Does the person, I don't know if you can speak for the world or if Dion can speak for the world, but what do you think that is? Is it a person who is kind of swimming back to that original perfected form?
I think that, okay, so when people have like an ultra negative reaction, you know, it tends to come from two places, right? It tends to come from, like you said, this place of attraction where people, they, you know, especially people, if you're straight male, you'll understand this, but like there's almost a visceral reaction. People see a gorgeous woman walk in the room, they're just going to look, right? It's like, it's beyond your physical control. So there are people who will have that reaction to a trans person and then freak the hell out, right? This was even a legal defense. This was a legal defense for decades, right? Gay panic. You know, because you perceive someone, maybe a woman, and you're attracted to them. And then all of a sudden you start questioning your own sexuality now. Am I gay because I thought someone who may be masculine in a sense, or may have been masculine at birth, I'm attracted to? You know, so it's a lot of, but again, it comes back to this all about protecting the patriarchal masculine image and defending that image. Because I also have the other reaction from people who get upset is from people who wish they could do that. You know, it's from people who are deeply in the closet, who are deeply hurting, who hate themselves. And when they see people doing stuff that they feel they can't, why can they do that? Look at that freak. Look at that freak. You know, and you also get this, don't pay attention to me. You get those people who are slightly gay. Like a perfect example, and I've brought this up before, is in the States, you have that Moms for Liberty group, right? Have you heard it? Who are banning all those books? Well, one of the leaders for Moms for Liberty, this woman, got caught in a threesome with another woman, right? And now she's facing losing her position, right? This is one of the most vehemently anti-homosexual people in the public sphere, who hates gay people, thinks that they shouldn't be allowed in public life, yet she's having gay sex in her private life with her husband, you know? And like, that should not be a problem. But it's this hypocrisy of it all. Like, why are you policing other people, but your own sexuality is not at issue? Like, how dare you? And this is what it is. It's a lot of this oppression. If we all just backed the F off and allowed people to be themselves, there would be no problems here, right?
But
like, there's nothing wrong.
But then we wouldn't have Moses in the U.S. saving us from all of the degenerates. Like, I'm sure if they were to look at any of us, they would say degenerates. Oh, that guy's probably a Satanist, right? That one's a degenerate, right? Probably involved in X, Y, or Z. Did you notice that before the war started, there was all this in Ukraine? There was all this propaganda about Ukrainians being gay and on drugs.
Yeah. They're homosexuals and they're fascists, right? It's this classic thing that the right loves to do too, where, you know, on one hand, my enemy is entirely, completely sissified and effeminate and incapable of doing anything, but on the other hand, they're the most capable, most powerful people. Like, I hate it's such silliness, you know. It's so ridiculous. And yeah, like Putin. Remember, you brought this up. It was so wild. I remember we were talking and you're like, they're going to come after the bigendered goddess. They're going to mention this idea of an intersex god. And then Putin, like 2 days later, is in the news yelling and screaming about how the Anglicans are making God non-binary, which isn't even true. It was just one pastor in one church who was like, yeah, I think that makes sense. I think God's above gender. God doesn't really have gender. You know, they're God. But, you know, Putin is like, our God is a masculine God. How dare you say our God may be partially female? It's like, what the fuck?
I just saw the most horrific video I've seen, and it had a picture. It started out with a picture of one of the Israeli soldiers who had just blown some mosque up or something, and he had his religious garb on. He had his phylacteries on. He was just rejoicing in all of the destruction, right? And all of the destruction, and connected to that was this we're going to push forward and we're going to purge the world of everything that is godless, right? Doesn't matter whose blood it is, doesn't matter. That old style of kind of medieval thinking, it wasn't a product of the Middle Ages, but it was characterized the Middle Ages. That kind of thinking is right now with a gun to the head of every government on the planet. This is a takeover. This, whether or not they can do it in Uganda and just pass laws and just have it that way, that's what people like Mike are bringing to our world. It's the inability to see that. Like I can tell Dion sees it. I can tell a lot of my fellow Americans see it. But our inability to call it what it is and to say, look, this Christianity will not explode our democracy. It will not take down our democracy. We can't. There's a blood in the air and an attraction for lies that is just, it's unbelievable. Vlad is, what's coming next, right? What's coming next?
Well, what we're seeing, I think, Ammon, is that we're seeing, like within my lifetime, it's been so wild because up until about 2021, I would say things were on a steady course of constantly progressing throughout my entire life. When I was a young person in high school, I got shit on like crazy. But then come university, no one gave a shit if anyone was homosexual. And then I would talk to people who were younger, and they were totally different high school experience to me. You talk to Gen Z, they are en masse, do not care about sexuality or gender. These are not massive issues in the same way. But all of a sudden, what we're seeing now, it's like the writing was on the wall for a lot of this Christian theology. People were moving away en masse. They were exiting churches. They were abandoning the faith. And now we're seeing this kind of pendulum swing where the religion is trying to fight back from the death throes. This is the dying threshes of a cult that's desperately trying to stay relevant, to keep their evil claws into us, and we need to recognize it. And like you said, call it out for what it is,
I was really proud of Liz Cheney for stepping up and getting on there and saying, alerting people. You have a religious radical who, she said, he does not believe in the separation of church and state. He does not follow that, right? It's his opinion that our founders really wanted a theocracy, right? This virus replicates and it happens. Snappy, is it going to happen in Canada too? Because I know you guys have our evangelicals. I know.
Yeah.
We have got them too.
We have the same billionaires. We have the same people, the same kind. The names change, but the game plan is the same. And we're slightly more polite about it, but it's the same thing. Our conservatives right now are exploding in the polls because people are fed up with their centrist. It's the same thing you saw with Obama, where Obama did not bring the change that was promised. So then people are hurting and are angry and they're reactionary and they want a firebrand who will come and cause pain. And they're not being rational. And I can understand a lot of people why they would be upset, but they've been lied to. And they think the issue is one individual sitting in the PM chair. They're not questioning what's going on with their system. They're not trying to come up with actual solutions. They're being fed scapegoats. They're being fed lies. Like, we need to stick with fossil fuels. We need to scapegoat trans kids. We need to, go after immigrants. We need to go after the liberals. These are the problems. None of those are the problems. Those aren't real problems, right? Like, democracy requires us to functionally work together and to set aside our differences to work together for a common goal. This has gone completely impossible with modern people, right? Like with conservatives who literally think that the left are psycho crazy rapists killing and consuming babies. And it's the same thing when you talk to the left. They think that about the right. Like, how can we have any kind of communal government where people's voices are heard and we're addressing issues in kind if it's this constant strong arm bullshit where you got, I know what's right and I am going to force my will. Well, you're in a democracy. This is not like, I don't care if you have the right goddamn answer. This is not how this works. There is no right answer. That's the wrong way to approach this. It's about getting shit done to make a functioning government. But we're not at that place. Our state has been compromised by religious extremists and the corporate wealthy. You know, and it's about energy extraction and about maintaining the status quo and keeping us enslaved. You know, sorry to rant, but
what do you think, Dion, about human sacrifice? What do you think? How many women and children in Gaza is it acceptable to kill in order to satiate the thirst for revenge that is in Israel? And by the way, the Romans were asking the same question, right? Hey, take your stupid factions and stop. Put them down. Anybody? Put them down. And what you're going to do is you're going to focus on civilization and building civilization. The Romans went through provinces all east of Italy, and that's all they did was they stopped the idiots who were destroying each other over this very same garbage. Right? No, it's my land. No, it's your land. No, it's my land. Well, he's sitting there. Oh, I'm going to take his shit. Right? Same stuff. No, build some roads, assholes. Right? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. Right? But that's what the Romans were saying. Right? Oh God, here comes another group, another faction. They're going to try to overthrow the government because they have the truth. They have the truth. What growth have we had as human beings?
I wanted to ask you this.
1,000 years. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you this because this is so poignant, right? A few months back, my friend Graham and I, we did a deep dive into the Oresteia. And I'm looking at our society today, and it's the same. We're still doing tit for tat blood feuds. We still cannot set up proper courts of justice, and we're still under the command of the Furies. And where's the goddess to come in and to get us to set aside our bullshit and to come together and to elect a democratically run proper court system? Like, we're still doing the same blood feud bullshit, you know? Like,
yeah, where's Athena, who is that masculine femininity, right? And by the way, she's the virgin too, so she's not taking any of your bullshit. And for those of you who didn't know, the goddess Athena, who's immortality, she set up her government while she had a lover. She's a virgin, but she has a female lover, right? Too bad. I don't care that you care. You know, it's democracy. That's where this democracy came from. As long as we have that virus of that Taliban fundamentalist, extremist, radical, orthodox way of thinking, we're not going to have it. And that document, everybody's so happy now that they can look at the Old Testament as it's a creation of the 3rd century. It's a falsehood that this is your history. It's not, right? It's not. So stop destroying everybody. As long as you got people who are going to go in and hold up arms and scream with their religious ornaments on their heads. I don't care if they're carrying flags of crosses. I don't care if they're carrying flags with stars on them. I don't care. When they have that religious shit there, your democracy is going to fall. That's all there is to it. Israel is a democracy, and this is not. If this is the will of the people of Israel, which I don't think it is, I honestly don't think the women and children sacrificing them, I don't think it's what they want, but it sure is for that grinder side that likes to torture itself. Those closeted people, oh God, that's what they want to bring, and they'll kill all of you to get there. Well, give them all nukes. Here's an idea. Watchers, give them all nukes and watch what happens, right? Oh,
we need
God.
to listen We need to listen to the extremists when they talk. What do the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews truly want? They want to bring about what? Om Lamda, return of heaven on earth. What is their heaven on earth? It's where Jesus returns as a singular hierarchical king who rules with 144,000 chosen preceptors, and the rest of us suffer for all eternity in a blood war. Okay, is that the future that people want? That's the future that these religious extremists are fighting for. That's their idea of a good time, when they get to have eternal hierarchy of the 1%.
You know, it's funny in terms of politics. I don't vote. I didn't vote. I don't remember the last time I voted. That'll probably upset a few people. I consider both sides as secret societies, mystery cults, and they're going to do whatever they're going to do. I could try to maybe educate people or speak out every now and then when I feel excited or triggered, but they're going to do what they're going to do. I got my own mystery cult. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I cook my own food and it tastes good. So they do what they do. I'm going to do me.
I'm coming to the Republic of Dion. That's what I want to do. I want to visit as a political ambassador. I want to come there someday. Dion, please invite me and Snappy over so we can have a, celebrate your traditions and your people. Would that be nice?
Yeah, my traditions and people are y'all. All of y'all, right. Including everybody, including all the people that I have a problem with. And so that's where the relationship begins. It's not with what I enjoy or what's comfortable to me. It's what's uncomfortable to me. That's where the relationship begins. Because that's where we have to take the first steps, everybody, to overcome it. Because it's just ourselves. We're self-consuming it. It's a self-consuming process. And at a certain point, we're going to look down and stop chewing on our own leg. And that's what killing each other is about, over these gods and these energies and this and that. Good and bad, black and white, male, female, whatever. At a certain point, we just got to chill and love each other and accept.
At a certain point, someone has to be the bigger woman. They got to be Athena. They got to look the humanities they got to look the Furies in the eyes and say, here's a bone. I will take your bullshit. You need your tit for tat? I'll take the hit and we'll end it at that. But someone eventually has to take the hit and say, you know what, I'm not going to hit back because it doesn't matter. I'm bigger than this, and let's end the feud. Someone has to be the bigger person in all of this. Why can't we as a society, as a community, come together? Like, why do we have all these memes about like globalization as the absolute evil, as community, as like this boogeyman? They have us terrified of our neighbors. Like, your neighbor is the person you're supposed to rely on in times of danger. And I have friends, like literal friends, who are like, yeah, I got guns in case society collapses and my neighbors come to kill me. I'm like, I know my fucking neighbors. They're not coming to kill me. They're coming to give me water, okay, and shelter. We're gonna help each other, all right? Like, I don't know what neighborhood you're in. Like,
isn't it funny that that's the option? Right? We just collapse everything. Well, I'll get guns and kill other people too, right? We'll just have a giant kill fest, right? What is wrong with your society when it gets to the point that a group of people, 30%, it's always a minority, right? But they are the ones who figure out this power can be exercised. How do you do when your Christians figure out, oh, we can take over the system and drive this baby right into the ground? How do you stop them at that point? Historians say when it gets to 30%, you can't. But those very philosophies that you're talking about, that inherent drive to destroy self, that is the apocalyptic dessert that we're all waiting for, because they want that to come. Snappy, there will be people who want to kill you. There are already people who want to kill us. For what reason? I don't know. Right? Yelling at us on the internet. Degenerate homosexual.
Now check this out.
Words, right? Like this, people got burned at the stake for saying don't get rid of Greek scholars. People got thrown in prison by these Catholics. We talk about Satan. That 100 years ago, that would get us all murdered, right?
Now imagine with the advent of QAnon in 2016, Next year, it's going to happen again. And the word is ARG, augmented reality game, or LARP, live action role play, with Comic-Con and playing dress up. That's a form of the mystery rite coming back. So when all the kids dress up every year as these anime characters and comic characters, they're recreating the mystery rite because it's about superpowers and they're trying to transmute their mundane lives by taking on these weird characters and stuff. Well, in Christianity, in politics, we have this LARP, this live action role play, which is happening with evangelicals, where it's one thing to go to church and hear about it and get riled up, but you want to participate as a warrior, as a Templar knight in real life. It's the Joan of Arc thing. You want to go out and there's an enemy. That's what QAnon was about. There's a secret person giving the codes, and there's an enemy that we got to go out and fight, and we got to go down in basements where there's not basements under pizza parlors and kill people. And so
right. We just saw
what snappy is that with this advent of the live action role play, they need characters in their Christian video game. We're good characters for that video game, causing problems. You know, they don't go after those Satanists, what I call the Satanists that are into heavy metal and hurting animals and suffering, and we're all black, and they ain't having a good time. They're not living their best lives. They're suffering. And that form of Satanism is not Satanism. That's Christianity, mind you. Don't get it twisted. They're thinking they're practicing something. That's just Christianity, the negative form. And they don't bother them. They bother people that talk about ancient Greek texts and enlightenment and responsibility and freedom and democracy. That scares them.
Yeah, drugs and sex. That's what scares them, Dion. You're so right. That's it in a nutshell. In an absolute nutshell.
Amen. Amen. Amen to that.
But we're getting up to over 2 hours, guys, so I think we should probably wind it down. I know Amon's got stuff to do. We all have lives to live, and I'm sure we've occupied everyone's time too much already. So before we call it an evening, though, what do you guys want to say? What do you want to leave our audience with this topic of Satanism and this? We're seeing it encoded in literature and in culture. We see it in our modern culture. What is this point? What is this about? And what are we trying to get at here?
I'll go first so Dion can have the last real word. But in one sentence, you're seeing it coming. And this power is rising. Don't fight it. Don't stand against the wave. It's a part of history, and it's a natural purgation of the virus. It's an attempt at the human psyche to heal itself. So don't fear the Satanism or the things you're calling Satanism, right? Don't fear them. They're coming. You don't have it. And by the way, the Christians out there, this is exactly what they want. Exactly. It's why their prophets foretold it. It's gorgeous. I love it.
So, I expand on that. What we're doing is we're teaching people about necromancy and the dark side and Satanism, is teaching y'all love. This is about love. That's what it comes down to. Different forms of love. Learning how to heal and love things that you don't like. That's what the dark side's about. And taking responsibility for your shadow energy, for things that you're uncomfortable for things that other people do. Even take responsibility for that. Because that's what enlightenment is about. That's what the Luciferian energy is about healing darkness.
Yeah, about evolution, transformation, growth, free will, and the pursuit of that ever-transforming growth, right? The big thing, what is the main issue with Christianity is stagnation. It's this fear, this inability to constantly embrace that transformative change, to be afraid of the other. Luciferian Satanism, it tells you to look into the abyss and allow it to transform you and to keep walking forward in spite of the uncertainty, in spite of the fear, because death, even if you die, you're going to be reborn and it's going to keep going. The game never ends. It's an unfolding. All experience is meant to be experienced, no matter how good, bad, or negative, and all will be experienced, right?
Mm.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. This was so much fun. Like and subscribe. If you go to the comments or to the description below, there's links to Aman. You can follow him at Lady Babylon 666. Him and Chewy have a live stream every Friday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. MT. So make sure you go check out Aman. And Dion and I will be back next week for part 3. We don't know how many parts we're going to do. This is such a deep topic, and it's one that we're both passionate about. So we'll be on this for a little while. So please come back next week for more Luciferian Europe haute couture debauchery. All right, everyone. Peace and love. Hail Satan. Take care.